I'm Erin Blundon with Baccalieu Collegiate with the NLTA president Trent Langdon. And today we're going to talk about general mental health and students' overall well-being. I would just like to know a bit about your general thoughts and feelings on it. From your experience as a teacher and as a guidance counselor, how have you seen student mental health challenges evolve over the years?
It certainly seems to be there's more discussion about it. That's certainly a very positive thing, but I really don't think kids have changed themselves through the years. What they've had to adjust to is society and how things have changed in society through social media. There seems to be a lot more evidence of things in the media around wars and uncertainty, climate change that makes people anxious. So we are seeing heightened levels of anxiety, it seems. But on the other side, I'm seeing kids being very resilient. They're great spokespeople for their age group, but also for change in the world. So I like that piece.
Do you think that social media and everything going on as a whole, do you think students today face greater mental health struggles than previous generations? If you do, what are the biggest contributing factors?
Well, with social media, I think there's never a break. I think kids have become, some might argue, addicted to their devices and so on, or they get their satisfaction or they get their affirmation, I guess, around whether they're good enough or not so good from the responses they get on social media, when we know the majority of those people aren't real close relations. So I think kids use social media as a gauge as to how good of a person they are. That worries me somewhat, or that's the first place they'll go when they have any free time, up to the point of many hours spent in front of a screen. I don't want to sound like an old person, but I do think there's a time and a place for screens, but limiting that. But also, we know full well that if you do anything in excess, it could impact your mental health, and it could dominate for you. So that's a worrisome piece. But overall, I think it's just a matter of pulling back a notch on that piece and reliance on social media and reliance on technology to find that balance with general day-to-day human interaction.
Do you think students' mental health was better before social media was a higher impact on students?
I think, I don't necessarily think it was better. I think we now know more about it. And I really like the fact that children and teenagers are willing to come and speak to myself or other mental health professionals about what they're experiencing. So I think people are just more vocal. Do I think there's more stress or anxiety out there? I don't think so. It's just that we're better talking about it, which seems like as a result that there is more. But it is something that I think the world is a much different place than it was, say, when I was growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, just in terms of the warfare, the climate change issues, like I said before, and just overall stress of matching up to someone you may not even know that lives in a different country. And so that's the social media piece.
How does mental health impact a student's ability to learn and socialize and engage in school life?
That's an excellent one. My biggest worry around technology is how it tends to dominate a young person's existence. Probably the last thing they touch before they go to sleep. Probably allows or forces them to be up to 2 o'clock in the morning. The phone is charging next to their head. Probably the first thing they grab in the morning is the phone to do an update and to check all their snaps and do whatever and check in with your friends and whatever. So it's that constant reliance on that piece. And I think it's steering young people away from the more traditional things of reading and human interaction, going to different groups, going out with friends and so on. When I speak to young people, they say, no, I still have a group of friends. But just a few weeks ago, I was speaking to a young person and they had said, yeah, I spent my entire weekend with my friends. I said, that's great. They said, yeah, I was on Xbox the entire weekend. So they were with their friends, but it was all through. And so to me, yes, it's interaction, but it's not that human contact. For example, I'd much rather do this than to be doing this interview virtually.
What mental health programs or services are currently available to students in Newfoundland, and do you think they're sufficient?
Myself and Jennifer, my colleague, when we were talking about services in Newfoundland and Labrador, the problem with Newfoundland and Labrador is we're so spread out. Old Perlican is a very small community, but it still requires support. But there's hundreds of communities like Old Perlican, Newfoundland and Labrador that need to be replicated. I think the province is doing fairly well with, for example, the Bridge the Gap app and the Bridge the Gap website. What's nice about social media is kids can find their communities. So say if you have a young person struggling with their identity or with their sexual orientation, they can find communities online And what I also like about it is you can access resources whether you're in person or not, whether it's virtual counseling. So in one way, I don't think Newfoundland and Labrador is doing enough. But at the same time, I do believe because of the other supports that are out there that they complement each other, and that sometimes you don't always have to have a face-to-face interaction for success.
How do you think that schools can better identify students who might be struggling with mental health, but they're not seeking help on their own?
Parents and guardians is a big one. We need to, from day one, when the start of school begins, is important to for teachers and guidance counselors to have clear communications with the home to say, look, if anything goes wrong, the school can be a point of contact for you. Again, Old Pearlican, other small areas, many times, say, a social worker or a nurse or a psychologist may not be completely available, so it's often the teachers that hear first about a mental health issue, but your teachers are well trained to know that you go through a guidance counselor. You can look at other ways of getting support. So I think the schools are doing phenomenal work around mental health and so on. But I do think teachers have their thumb on the pulse of schools, and I bet you your teachers know if someone comes in during the day and is having a rough day, they know. If they see you every day, they know if you're off your game one day. And so in my school that I teach in Mount Pearl, St. Peter's, many times a teacher will come to me and say, Mr. Langdon, this student is off today. Maybe you'll want to check in on them. And it's those daily check-ins that really make a difference. And then over time, you build relationships. If it's a really critical incident, let's say a student is suicidal or a student is considering some dangerous activity around drug use and so on, I like to think that they know where they can go, but that's why it's important for us to know the students well.
What barriers do the students face in accessing those mental health supports at school, and how do you think we can remove those barriers?
Right. So you probably think I'm going to say stigma, and that's right. I am going to say stigma. There is still a stigma attached to mental health and mental illness. People think it's weak to go look for support. I think we've come a long way, though. I think we certainly better than when I was growing up, and there's also a gender piece there too. Whether you're male, female, non-binary, whatever, it seems like different groups struggle to varying degrees as to who wants to be more open. From my experience, I feel success in students willing to come and speak to me. Doesn't matter what gender you are. But I have also heard of cases where many individuals prefer the virtual piece. They don't like the face-to-face. And so whether it's Kids Help Phone or some of these other groups, that it makes a big difference, the virtual piece. So I like the virtual option for those who want it. I like the face-to-face for those who want it. So we need a full circle of services.
Contributing on to that, how do you think schools can reduce the stigma around mental health so students feel safe in getting the help?
Well, this interview is one. I think you're doing good work with this. I think for us, Bell Let's Talk Day, those types of things. I think, but it's more than just Bell Let's Talk Day. I think it needs to be a regular reminder, whether it's, say, outside the guidance office or there's other events throughout Transgender Day or Day of Transgender Remembrance. And we know many times that it's individuals in that community that, have higher rates of suicide and those types of things, that there's a time and place for everything. If there's newcomers that are coming to Canada and they're struggling with their new place where they're living, offering additional supports, because it's not just the economic support or the housing supports, it's being there to support them overall. So I think we just need to be thinking about relationships all the time. But most importantly, I think students know when another student is struggling. The most luck I've had in helping someone is when a friend has come to me and said, look, my friend is suicidal, you need to do something. Otherwise, that student wouldn't. So I do think students are the key to all that.
What strategies have you seen work, like in creating a more inclusive and mentally supportive school environment?
I think any time that you work on making it a safe space, as the NLTA, we talk regularly about safe spaces. We talk about making sure that schools are a place where everyone feels like they're a part of something, because it's impossible for me as a teacher to predict everything that's going to come through the door. Impossible. So again, whether it's a multicultural thing, whether it's a gender thing, whether it's sexual orientation, if it's a low economic thing, everyone has got their own battles that they're fighting. So what I like to see is when school communities are so open that in spite of what the issue is, they can talk to somebody about it. It could be your art teacher, it could be your phys ed teacher, doesn't matter. but you got to have that one person who you know you can trust. So welcoming school environments, I think, is the number one answer.
Yeah. Are there any effective stress management or resilience programs in place for students, especially during high-pressure times like exams or post-graduation planning?
I'll go back to the virtual thing. There's a lot of really cool online virtual options for kids to stress relief, calm apps, and that's all good stuff. I think the more we do around study skills and knowing what you're walking into, as a result of COVID, many of our students didn't get a chance to do exams.
Yeah.
So walking into high school exams for the first time, or certainly walking into university exams for the first time, are heavy. I think we need to get kids ready rather than them hit the brick wall when they start the exam. Yeah. And that's what I hear many times is young people get into the exam, they didn't know what they were walking into. And we have a lot of young people who feel overwhelmed with life. And school is just one small piece of that. So any way we can make a young person know what they're walking into, I think that's key.
Is there a certain way that you think schools can prevent mental health crises before they escalate more than they already have?
Mm-hmm. Say there is an event that has taken place that there's a history in the community of we got parts of this province where there's high suicide rates, for example. Very sad situation. So obviously work needs to happen in those schools to debrief on all that stuff and prepare, because more than likely it's going to happen again, but also to prevent. That's an example. It's very key after there's been an event of a tragedy of sorts to do proper debriefing rather than, okay, we'll close the school, for 2 days, and then everything opens up and we're back to normal. There's a real learning experience that needs to happen. I do believe there's a time and place for psychologists and so on, but I really do think the school community itself is the one that's most important and most productive.
Do you see a connection between rising substance use among teens and declining mental health? How do you think schools can address this matter?
That is a huge challenge for teachers right now. I'll start off with vaping. There's still a lot to be learned about vaping. And as teachers, we're very concerned as to if that is considered a gateway into smoking and into other drugs. I think any young person who's willing to inhale anything that is chemical in nature has potential to take it to the step further. So it's that is a huge issue right now, because we know students are vaping regularly in washrooms. They're congregating in washrooms and so on. So that's a big piece. The heavier drugs, absolutely, we are concerned about. There's been many instances of young people overdosing and unfortunately losing their lives in this province, and then school communities are struggling to get over that. We do know that children are using marijuana frequently, many times through the vape, and that's the connection from the original vape with nicotine to marijuana. And then we've even heard stories of kids going to the next step of saying cocaine and other types of things in school settings, and not just school settings in parties. We know partying is a very common thing come grade 9, grade 10, if not earlier. So that's real. That's life, But preventing children or giving them the tools they need to understand that once you take that step, you've all heard of fentanyl, you've heard of these types of things, that it's a one shot only, generally, and it's so risky that you certainly got to know what you're getting into. And just to go back to your previous question, knowing before you go into the party, and I'm going to draw the line at having a drink, or I'm going to draw the line at vaping the vape that I bring with me, not something someone gives me. We don't expect children to be perfect, and we don't expect them to be totally separate from these types of things, but to use some common sense. Same as drinking and driving. If you're going to go, call your parent at 2 a.m., don't drive somebody else. So it's just making some good decisions.
Yeah. How do you think families and schools work together to better support students' mental well-being?
You mean the parents and so on, or is that? Yeah.
Like parents and school all together.
Okay. That's a big challenge, because families seemingly, to go back to your very first question, is the kids have changed, I think, some ways, because families seem to be getting busier and busier and busier. And because there's so much responsibility, I got to get to dance, I got to bring my kid to hockey, I got to bring my kid to basketball, I got to clean the house. So it seems like actual family time is diminishing, and it seems like we're seeing less and less parents in schools visiting and being part of, say, volunteer groups and so on. I think we need to go back to that model. There's not enough of that, because a school should not be a standalone institution in a community. people shouldn't say Baccalieu Collegiate and not know anything more about it.
Yeah.
They should know everything that's going on here. Parents should be supportive. They should be helping with the decision-making that goes on here and supporting it fully. And then if you get into the mental health and the drug use and just knowledge in the families, and so more needs to be done in building the parent connections.
What long-term improvements would you like to see in mental health services over, say, the next 5 or 10 years?
Right. There needs to be a greater connection between the Department of Education and the Department of Health and a mixing of their services. Right now, it's getting better. We do refer, as guidance counselors, I do refer out to intake for the Department of Health for mental health services. But there needs to be more of an interaction. I do think, especially for rural areas where there may not be a counselor or a psychologist that they can go to privately, to really amp up through CDLI maybe and those types of things, to have greater access to mental health care. I do think school-wide mental health care is very important too, through projects such as this and other school-wide things you need to be doing to reduce the stigma and so on. So, but this province, we will need to rely more heavily on virtual mental health care, for example, the coast of Labrador or the rural areas. And why not? It seems to work. And from what I've heard, virtual mental health care is very, very positive.
What's the biggest challenge that schools are facing in providing mental health support, and how do you think it can be fixed?
Biggest challenge is identifying. Schools are very busy. They're very populated. I don't know, how many students do you have in your school? Any idea?
We have about 160.
Okay, 160. So that you would probably have, I don't know, 20 to 30 staff perhaps. I teach in a school of 700, and there's about 50 to 60 staff, and there's 2 guidance counselors, myself and another person. So 700 people, so that leads to me to believe that there's about 1,400 parents and guardians. Yeah. So 2 people looking after the mental health needs of 2,000 people really quickly. So you can quickly see. That's why you need everybody well connected, and that is the biggest challenge, is knowing who's coming through your doors every day. But the teacher-student relationship is key. We have some children that are very disconnected from school. School absenteeism is a big worry for us. There's a good portion of the province's children who don't attend school regularly. And if there's something going on, we don't know about it. I remember during COVID, there were certain children we couldn't connect with at all. We didn't know where they were. I even jumped in my truck during COVID and went looking for them in their communities to say, I got to see, they're not answering their phone, they're not answering their emails. Yeah. So we actually tried to find them in the neighborhood. Some was successful, others not. And that was a time when you couldn't go knock on their door because of, so that is I would say student absenteeism is very much correlated with mental health needs, whether it's anxiety-induced or depression, whatever it might be. So that would be my biggest concern. Yeah.
If you could implement one major change to improve student mental health in Newfoundland schools today, what would it be?
I would increase the number of guidance counselors and school psychologists. I don't know how often you see it. Do you have a full-time guidance counselor here, or would you know, it's probably part-time?
A couple days a week.
Yeah.
Was also with all 3 of the elementary schools and here.
So I would institute a full-time guidance counselor in every school. That's number one. Just imagine you had a person here all the time who could assist with this kind of stuff even. Yeah. And you can imagine if there's a crisis in this school and is there a woman you have as a guidance, okay, if she can't be here, the crisis is still happening and she may be in Beta Verde or wherever. You need a mental health professional on the ground in every school, 1 person for 160. I think that would be a great ratio. And that's one thing I would do. Another thing I would do is I would put public health nurses in every school because they have a mental health component, but they can also look after a bunch of other needs, vaccines and whatever it might be. So I think we need to infuse more community resources into the schools. What better than to use one of the rooms here as the nurses' station? That's the way it was when I was growing up, right? So I think there's more of a need to put services on the ground for the students.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
So that was easy. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.